All right, y'all. So let's break down Mark chapter 6. So, the chapter context, even as the 12 disciples are given opportunity to wield some of Jesus' power and authority, they still struggle to understand. They misinterpret who he is and what he has come to do and how much he will ask of them. They fear Jesus' display of deity, but seem to dismiss the murderous rejection of his hometown and the death of John the Baptist. It's easy to have faith in a prophet who seems poised to rescue Israel from foreign rules. It is still beyond them to understand that he is actually God. All right, let's get into this breakdown. So, after ramping up the scope of his miracles by calming a storm, exorcising a legion of demons, healing a woman without intent, and raising a dead girl, Marks 4:35 through 43. Jesus takes the 12 to his hometown of Nazareth. Jesus sees several different reactions to his ministry. The Gentile people of the Decapolis are afraid and beg him to leave. Mark 5:17. His family are ashamed and beg him to come home. Mark 3:21 and then 31 through 32. The Pharisees from Jerusalem and the Herodians are jealous and arrogant and plot to destroy him. Mark 3:6. But many people beg for his healing touch, crowding him to the point that he has to worry about his own safety. Mark 4:1. Nazareth greets Jesus with dismissive cynicism. Neighbors and family members he has known his whole life recognize the wisdom of his teachings, but reject the homegrown boy who teaches. That's weird. These reactions embody the adage of familiarity breeds contempt. Ironically, the attitude of those closest to Jesus seems to agree with the assumption of Nathanael, John 1:46, that nothing good comes from Nazareth. Jesus has just left a woman so filled with faith that she was healed simply by touching his cloak. Now the people who should know him have should know him best have so little faith that he can do little to help them. Christ's intent for using miracles is to perform them as a response to faith. When there is no faith, miracles would contradict his purpose. Mark 6:1 through 6. On the heels of this rejection, Jesus commissions the 12 to begin their own ministries in his name. He sends them off with the command to rely on those they teach for support and gives them authority to heal, exorcise demons, and even raise the dead. Matthew 10 and 8. These efforts will prove successful, but not without consequences. Mark 6:7 through 13. Mark underscores that times of victory will make the 12 vulnerable to great danger. He recounts the death of John the Baptist, who had condemned Herod Antipas' marriage, thereby earning the wrath of Antipas' wife Herodias. While Antipas moves to protect John, Herodias waits for an opportunity to strike. Her daughter earns the favor of Antipas in a foolish moment. Antipas promises her a favor. Herodias coaches her daughter to ask for John's head, and Antipas must deliver. I hope I'm saying that man right. I'm so sorry. Mark 6:14 through 29. Back in the present time, the 12 return exhausted and hungry, but filled with stories of success. Jesus plans a retreat and they board the boat, intending to find a secluded place to rest. Here, the 12 fall victim to their own success. The people recognize them as well as Jesus and follow so quickly that some reach their destination before the boat lands. Feeling compassion for the sheep without a shepherd, Jesus spends the days teaching and healing. At night, when the 12 wished to dismiss the crowd to find food, Jesus challenged them to provide the food themselves. Despite their recent experiences performing miracles, the 12 are stymied, and it is Jesus who must use a boy's lunch to feed thousands. Feeding the multitude with the fish and the loaves of bread. Mark 6:30 through 44. After dinner, After dinner, the people are even more convinced that Jesus is the promised Messiah, come to rescue them from the clutches of Rome. John 6:14 through 15. Although the 12 concur, they are still too confused by Jesus' behavior to act. Jesus hurries them back to Capernaum while he quiets the naturalistic fervor. With the crowds dispersed, he retreats to a mountain to pray, whether by moonlight or by breaking dawn. Jesus notices that despite rowing all night, the wind has allowed the 12 to travel only 3 or 4 miles. He walks across the water to them, intending to reassure them by revealing his glorious presence. But their ignorance drives them to fear, resolving they need to comfort more than epiphanies. He joins them in the boat and they arrive in Gennesaret, south of Capernaum. Mark 6:45 through 52. In Gennesaret, things are back to normal, or at least to the familiar pattern of Jesus' earthly ministries. The sick and injured mob Jesus as he and the 12 disciples travel countryside. Faith in Jesus's ability to heal has grown, however, and many are healed merely by touching the fringe of his cloak. Mark 6:53 through 56. Let's break this down. Part 2. Mark 6 explores Jesus' rejection by his hometown, his compassionate sending out of the 12 disciples to preach and heal, his divine authority and power demonstrated in the feeding of the 5,000 and walking on water. This chapter includes the tragic beheading of John the Baptist, highlighting the cost of discipleship and faith in the face of unbelief. So, Jesus' rejection in Nazareth, verses 1 through 6. Familiarity breeds contempt. Jesus returns to his hometown, but the people reject him. Unable to reconcile the carpenter's son they know as the Messiah, a prophet without honor. Despite performing miracles, Jesus finds that his people's lack faith prevents him from doing many works there. The sending of the disciples, verses 7 through 13, authority to preach and heal. Jesus sends the 12 apostles in pairs, giving them the authority over unclean spirits. Dependence on God's provision. They are instructed to rely on the hospitality of those they visit, but to be ready to face rejection by shaking the dust off their feet. The beheading of John the Baptist, verses 14 through 29, a tragic consequence of sin. The chapter records Herod's fear of John, but ultimately his unholy fear leads him to execute John to satisfy his wife. The cost of discipleship. This event serves as a somber reminder of the danger faced by those who follow God and the mystery of unbelief that leads to violence. Feeding of the 5,000, verses 30 through 44. Compassionate care for the crowds. Jesus sees the hungry crowds and, despite their large number, takes pity on them. Divine provision. He miraculously multiplies a few loaves of bread and fish to feed 5,000 men and their families, showing his power and care for his followers. Jesus walks on water, verses 45 through 56. Overcoming the storms of life. Jesus walks on the sea to his disciples, claiming their fear and demonstrating his divine power over nature. Hundreds hardened hearts and misunderstanding. Despite these powerful signs, the disciples' hearts remain hardened and they fail to truly understand the depth of Jesus' identity as the Son of God. All right, y'all, that is all I had for the breakdown of Mark chapter 6, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.